Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I am your host, Mike Merrill, and we are sitting down today with Dan Murray. He is a coach and a consultant with Your Restoration Coach. Dan has worked in the disaster and restoration sector for about 25 years and spent the last 12 years as a consultant serving contractors across Canada and the United States. So today he's going to share a little bit about the process of transitioning your business and eventually setting it to sell maybe to the next generation or to move on to retirement. So hello, Dan, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Mike. It's awesome to be invited and to participate in this podcast. And it's great to reconnect again. We haven't seen each other in quite a few years. And it's great to see what you've been doing to help different contractors and other service providers. I've been watching your progress as you have been moving along and what you've developed and have offered. And it's just great to connect again.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to this too. So thank you again, Dan. So before we kind of get going into the conversation, can you kind of share with our audience a bit about how you got into consulting from the restoration industry?
Well, that could be a long story, so I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. But I got into the service business and doing first in the early 1980s when the earth was young and dinosaurs roamed the earth kind of thing. And I first got into it as a carpet cleaner and a water damage contractor. And we did quite well. We operated that way for a couple of years. And then I had the grandiose vision of thinking that, well, why don't we start offering janitorial services? So we started a janitorial company and thinking that the same, quite often doing water damages and starting to do a little bit of firework back in those days, we would, have lots of peaks and valleys and in workload. So we did is that I thought that we could have our janitorial staff do firework in the daytime and help each other that way, but it just didn't work. I had two really good days in the janitorial business. You probably can guess what those 2 days are, Mike.
Yeah, the day you started it and the day you hung it up.
There you go. Absolutely. And what we found was that the definition of clean is completely different when you're doing a fire damage job versus doing a janitorial job. And the old janitorial expression used to be ash, trash, and dash. You just give the top of a desk a quick clean or give the traffic lane of a carpet a quick clean and it's clean. Well, you have a smoke damage, it's far from that. You have to do deep cleaning and clean every surface, clean furniture up and down and everywhere else. Anyway, 3 years later, we sold the janitorial. We started really focusing on doing full service restoration. And from there, our business just took off and we did, build it from basically scratch, from nothing to a multi-million-dollar business. Then in the 90s, I started doing catastrophe losses. I was involved with a franchise network and I was on their task force to develop a large loss division, which I headed up in Canada for several years. And I also traveled to the US doing large losses. And, large loss in those days was considered, anything over $250,000 single site loss. And the largest loss I was on, we did $2.3 million in 3 weeks. The largest single loss that I did on my own was a little over $1 million cleaning and painting. And we did it. We had a 45-day time frame to do it, and we finished it in 43 days. So then I had some good successes there for a few years. And then the franchisor that I was with asked me to come on board corporately. And I ran the Canadian division for them for 4 years. I had about 70 franchises across Canada. And that's where my passion for training and coaching and advising business owners really started to take foot. And then then I switched over to buying into a company in my area. And I did that for 6 years as a franchisor and operated a couple of the franchises. And we built it up to 15 offices, and then had a really, really bad parting of ways with a business partner. And I took a few months off, and then in 2009, we started full-time consulting and incorporated our company to do this in 2010, and we haven't looked back.
Oh, good for you. A lot of history and bumps and bruises and
Yeah.
war wounds, I'm sure also.
Yeah, that's what I always tell my clients is that, I do have structure, of course, and I have programs that I like to take people through, but a lot of what I do is just helping people through the life lessons that I've learned. I've made every mistake you can make, I think. I don't know, I still make the odd one, but my goal is to be that little, on someone's shoulder saying, no, well, you may, you could do it that way, but, you may want to think of this and this and this. Part of being a coach is that you help people make the decisions, whereas the consultant will do things for people. So in lots of times I'm doing more advising than coaching. And so it's really pretty awesome to get paid to do something that you love for an industry that you really have, spent your whole career in.
Yeah, good for you. And I know you're very respected and revered within the industry and the space. So it's been hard earned, of course.
Yeah, well, it's a great industry. What's been interesting is when we started in the early 80s, it was just basically, just a baby. We used to go to the local hardware store and buy the little dehumidifiers and buy the, those the axial fans and the square fans. There was no, equipment manufacturers that there are today. There was no testing procedures. Mm-hmm. And it's just really been a fun ride to see it from where it is now to see where it came from. And it's really almost a commodity business now, in that there are so many disaster restoration firms. We're all doing things based on the same training through the ICRC organization. We all, there's only, maybe half a dozen equipment manufacturers. There's only one remote timekeeping system we should be using, but we all know who that is. But and there's one main software. There's a couple other ones on the side, but for doing estimates and everything estimating. But it certainly has its challenges now from what it used to be, but it's a much larger business than we ever thought it could be.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's interesting because kind of like the topic that we're talking about today, lots of companies have to look into the future and kind of decide what that transition might look like when they either retire or sell a business. What do you think in either of those situations that companies can do today to prepare themselves for that eventual outcome that they have as a goal?
Well, you said a key thing, Mike, is that they need to prepare, because I've seen some really sad situations where a business owner hasn't. And it is not nice to get a phone call from the widow saying that, had a heart attack or or to get a call from the owner and I just had a meeting with my doctor, and you can fill in the blanks. Those are not nice calls to get. And at that point it's too late to maximize the value for the business. It's just basically, how do I get out of it? It's a fire sale type of deal, right? And it's sad. It really is sad, because I think I could say this, okay, most business owners have the biggest chunk of their retirement in their business. Real estate certainly is probably a big point, especially if you own your own building that you're operating out of. But as far as your net worth, what you have for savings to retire, it is what you're thinking you're going to get out of your business when you sell. And if you start thinking about that 3 months before you want to sell or have to sell, it's too late. So you have to prepare financially and get your business ready, I say a minimum of 2 years, but 3 to 5 years is the best.
Mm.
And so this is where I transition my business and the services that I do in consulting and advising and coaching is to help people get ready for this transition. This has been the last 6 years. It's been my main focus in business. I'm not a business broker. I don't do business brokerage services. I've worked with other business brokers or with business brokers. I don't do it, but what I do is I help with the getting ready, to get it ready for sale. But quite often the sale never happens.
Mm.
And the reason is that the same principles that make a business valuable to a potential purchaser are the same, standards in a business that make it easier to run, more profitable, less stressful for the owner, and help building a team. So I've said several of my clients say, well, why would I sell when it's starting to make this kind of money and it's running so smoothly? And now I can enjoy it and have a regular work schedule and enjoy the benefits and let it accrue.
Yeah, it's the double-edged sword. I think of, I'm in business and have been for most of my adult life as a contractor originally, and then helped start this business back in 2003. And so 95% of my life has been full throttle, pedal to the metal. I'm not thinking about, oh, eventually I've got to use some brakes, or maybe, the engine brake, if nothing else, and figure out how to, I guess if an analogy might be get off the freeway, to an off ramp, because at some point, as much as I love this and being in business is fun, it's also scary and difficult and challenging. And like you said, the last thing you want is to leave your wife with a mess because your health fails or you get too stressed. And so those things are real challenges. And it's great that there's individuals like you and companies out there that are helping educate and coach.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what you made a good point there, Mike, is that you're doing something that you love. And most entrepreneurs, I would hope, are doing what they love. But what happens, and I'm guilty, it happened to me, is that you get so enthralled with your business and it's all encompassing that you forget about your personal life.
Mm.
You forget about developing hobbies. And one of the things that has really come about to me in the last 5 or 6 years of working with so many entrepreneurs and contractors mainly is that they have to prepare themselves personally for the exit, because and I know what happened to me when I sold a couple of my businesses back in the 90s, and is that you need to have a vision for what you want to do personally after the sale, right? So that's one of so we have an exercise that we go through with potential with clients or potential clients. How do you what do you want to do? What do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do when you get free from this business? Why do you want to exit? Those are questions. And now I don't always need to know the answers that they come up with, but I'll ask them the questions and go ask them to talk it with their spouse, think it over with themselves, talk it with their family, because I know what happened to me is especially the first business I sold, because I worked night and day in it for 5 years, and I sold it at that time, it seemed like more money than I would ever have had in my life. But nowadays it's a pretty small sale. But one day I was walking down Main Street and, hey, there's Dan who owns this business, and Dan's, I'm getting calls to come to this luncheon, the Chamber of Commerce, and this and that, and people networking, dropping by my office. Next thing you know, I'm just sitting home. I took 3 months off when I was in my 30s and kind of revamp where I was going before I started my next business. And for those 3 months, I started realizing I'm not getting the calls. I'm not getting the invites. I don't have an office to go to. My self-worth was tied up in my business. So I'm always cautioning entrepreneurs to be careful because you have to really work at developing and keeping a life outside that, is tied into your family. And so, yeah.
So it sounds like if I were to kind of list off some check boxes or have a list of items that somebody should be aware of or be looking at to prepare, it sounds like having some personal goals and kind of a transition plan, some next steps established before you sell your business. Are there some other things that would make that checklist that companies should be thinking about?
For the company or for a personal, Mike, which I can go either way here. Which
I mean, maybe a little bit of both. I mean, what are some of the more important things in both of those areas? You identified maybe having some personal goals, but what else would be on that list?
Well, one that kind of crosses both the personal and the business is, what's the value? What do you need out of the business to retire? What is the business worth? Most people don't realize the terms make a big deal on a transaction, right? People say, well, let's just use a simple number. Let's say, well, my business is worth $1 million. Well, how is that paid? If the purchaser is only going to pay you 50% on upfront, and you got to do an earnout over, say, 5 years, if you hit all these benchmarks, you may or may not get the other, or only get a portion of it. So I say in those deals, you got to be happy with the initial amount. If you can live off that, then the rest is a bonus. That's where but so the terms is a big thing. And sometimes the more aggressive you are with the terms, the shorter how much you're paid up front, and the shorter any term is, usually it means that your amount of money that you're going to get shrinks a little bit. Right.
Right.
But really, what is your bottom line is what you got to be aware of, because, and then when you put your hat on from being the purchaser, and I've helped a couple of companies do acquisitions, tuck-in type acquisitions to expand in their local areas. What's a financial buyer buying? You got to put your hat on and think what the other guys, how they're thinking, right? And really what they're buying is your future profits, but even more important to that, how reliable those future profit estimates are. That's really what they're buying. And that's why when you see people say, well, I get 5 times EBITDA, or, I get, 6 times or 8 times, whatever industry, and you're different. But really what you're doing is that you're buying a predictable future profits, and it's discounted if it has a lot of variances up and big swings back and forth. It's got to be fairly predictable.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, I know we've worked with consultants too in our business, and one phrase that has stuck in my mind is one consultant told us, good companies sell, great companies get bought. And so making yourself attractive where people are pursuing you because of, predictable profits, branding, market recognition, future potential, all those things is an important factor aside from, just the EBITDA and other things that are maybe mathematical equations. There are other factors that can weigh into that value.
Absolutely. I'm going to steal that phrase. I like that one, Mike. What I have used in the past is, you're either going to get pushed out of the business or pulled out of the business.
Yeah.
Decide which way you want to go.
Yeah. Because
being pushed out of the business isn't fun, and not very profitable for the most part, right? But you said it much more eloquently than I did. So I'm going to steal that line when we're done.
I had to steal it from someone else to give it to you. So no problem.
Fair enough. So, but another point, as you said, is we have to think about, I think most of the audience listening to this are probably in the service-based businesses, right?
Yeah, whether it be construction, the trades, so to speak.
Yeah. So what business are we really in? And you'll hear people say, well, you're in the business of creating and keeping customers. Well, I always like to say we're in the people business. So when it comes time to start thinking about selling, you have to think of your team. And in all my correspondence and all my stuff that I've written over the years, whenever I mention team in a business, I always use a capital T, because I think they're so important that your team members need to be recognized. And so how will they be treated in a transition meant a lot to me when I did, some of my deals in the past. I've talked to other business owners where, they weren't all that concerned. They were, looking after themselves, which is fine. I can't judge. There's no right or wrong. There's no absolute decisions. It's whatever is right for you and your personality. But I do think that your people need to be treated right. You need to, and there's different ways that other people involve or not involve their team members in a potential discussions on a sale. Some people will make it very transparent. Others will keep it very close to the chest. When I sold my first business, I was, no, I don't think anyone knew until the day I announced it. But since then, I've a different thought is that, sometimes being transparent is good. Whether you transition your business to an employee team who's going to buy you out, or that's an option that can work really well, or have them minority partners so that you can have the freedom to do what you want because they have a vested interest is another option. So again, there's so many ways you can go, and there's so many different paths. It's according to your team that you have, how skilled they are, how passionate they are about the business, and where you are in your life and in your needs.
Yeah, I've heard said many times, and by other guests on the podcast, one of the important things in making sure that your business is scalable is making sure that you have layers, so that when you do exit the business can still function for the most part without you. And I think there's more value to a potential purchaser if that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. The better a business can run without the owner, the more profitable it will be to the owner on a sale. You're absolutely right. You should, if the listeners take anything from this podcast today, it should be that if they can reach a point where they work themselves out of a job in their own business, they're doing a good job.
Yeah.
And from a personal perspective, there is nothing more satisfying, it was at least to me in my career, was in seeing people grow and develop as leaders and managers in my company, and see them come to a point where they, could take over responsibilities and do things that they never thought they could. That is very self-rewarding as a manager, as you help other people develop.
Well, and I think, for many of us that are entrepreneurs, that's one of the most challenging things, is handing those reins over. I mean, this is your baby. And so to leave your baby in somebody else's arms for any amount of time is a bit of a hurdle, and you have to figure out how to get over that, really. Otherwise, you're going to be too connected, and it won't end well, probably.
Yeah, and one of the 8 drivers that we always work on with our clients, and I told you we have a bit of a structure that we work on, is what we call the hub and spoke model. And I think I've heard it on your podcast before, listening to other guests. And really, the more the owner is totally in control, and that, all the major customer decisions, sales and marketing decisions, supplier decisions, sub-trade decisions, all those are made by the owner. He or she is the hub. And it's a very stressful and tough position to be in. And when I started many years ago, when I had a bit of hair, working my way out of that position, one of the things, I may be getting ahead of myself a little bit on what we want to talk about towards the end, but one of the tips that I have for the listeners is, when someone comes to you with a problem and you know the answer, and a lot of times your team members, your employees will come to you simply for the fact that they've never been given the liberty to make a decision where they've worked before. They've never been, counseled that way, or given, when I go to work, I do what I'm told, right? I don't do what is right. I don't, the company culture is developed by somebody. If it's not developed by you, it'll be developed by some other part of your team. It may not be the culture that you want. But what happens is that when someone comes to you and says, hey, Mike, should I go to Mrs. Smith's job and start that today? Or should I go clean up the shop? I'm just using a silly example. But when someone comes to you with a question like that, you can start coaching and developing them to make decisions on their own by saying, well, what is, instead of just barking out the order, which most of us do, you can say, well, what do you think we should do, Joe? Or what do you, what's Mrs. Smith, what's the condition of, what was it, her expectations, Joe? And then when they give you the answer that you like, you say, well, yeah, I agree. That's a good decision. Go ahead and do that. And you do that enough times. Or if they give you a silly answer, I think I should go wash the truck instead of go serving a customer, you can say, well, let's stop and think about that for a minute. And here's the 3 reasons why you may want to reconsider. But have them involved. And after a while, they'll start making decisions on their own.
Yeah, I think that's great. One analogy that popped into my mind, I've used this in the sales environment before, but we've all used a navigation system, GPS. And when I've traveled a lot like you do, and I'm in an unfamiliar city, I lean heavily on that GPS and I'm waiting to be told where to go and what to do. And it's difficult to navigate until you hear that voice tell you where to go. But if you don't have a GPS and you've got to pay more attention, then you can usually get along just fine also. And it's more just knowing that you can depend on your own ability instead of waiting for somebody else to tell you where
That's
to
right.
turn.
That's right. And there's one benefit, I guess, when we are recording this, we're in the middle of the COVID, the pandemic, and travel is it's really come to almost a screeching halt. And I was doing 35 weeks a year on the road for the last 10 years, visiting clients. And a few months ago, I came to a screeching halt, and I do everything on Zoom now, and Loom. I use another service called Loom, but Zoom is my main one for two-way videos. And I don't know whether I'm going to go back to the travel. This is working out extremely well. I wouldn't want to be in the air carrier business or hotel business right now, I don't think.
Yeah, it is amazing what we can do when you hear the phrase, where there's a will, there's a way. And when your options are limited and you've got to figure it out, there's a lot of different approaches that you can take that might be equally, or even to your point, more effective.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So with this topic of discussion, what are some things that business owners can do to sell their business or hand it on to a future generation, a son or a nephew, or somebody else that you're mentoring, with no regrets? Because I think that would be one of the bigger challenges. And it's one that I hear about quite a bit. Once companies do sell or do pass things along, there's all the reasons that they wish they wouldn't have, or that they wish something would have been different.
Well, it's really, to use the old adage, it really depends. It depends on the owner, what they're doing. But, there's a personal attachment to businesses for the most of us, right? So when you detach from the business, what are you going to do with your life? How, I guess a short and simple answer to that question I tell people is that a happy exit is meaning that you have a happy life. In other things beside business, whether it be coaching your kids at sports, or traveling, or doing whatever. But and the other thing is, the big thing, of course, really, why are we in a business? It's really to have financial resources to be able to live the life that we want. So, again, the first driver of the 8 company drivers that we work on with people, number one is the financial performance of your business. Your financial performance has to be good, and it has to be improving all the time. And while you own the business, it allows you to be remunerated properly. And when you go to sell, it'll also do that as well. Because you got to remember, when you say 5 times whatever, or 4 times, whatever the multiple is you're getting paid on your EBITDA, is basically, if you can make an extra $100,000 a year by running a good business and keeping things tight. If you get 5 times that multiple when you sell, that's $500,000. And I don't care who you are, $500,000 is probably going to make a little bit of a difference on your enjoyment.
Sure.
Can I make another point on this, Mike?
You bet. Yeah, absolutely.
One of the big things I see people not considering when they sell, they always think about the big dollar amount they can get. They don't stop and consider all the costs that are involved. Lots of times, especially if you go through brokers and other professionals, you're going to have lawyers and accountants, and you can spend tens of thousands of dollars on lawyers and accountants really quick, just getting your business ready to deal with the due diligence and all this sort of thing. Then if you get brokerage fees, so you can have 8 to 10% easily in fees on what you're going to pay for a transaction. And then, you can have some personal fees if you guys, holding companies or family trusts or whatever. You can have other fees involved with setting up all that and to save taxes. And then the big thing that most people don't stop and think about is how they're going to be taxed on their earnings. So I always say for just, hold your thumb up in the air and pick a number, but basically a third roughly of what you get out of your business, you'll end up keeping in your pocket. And most people don't take that into consideration. They think if I sell for $1 million, I get $1 million. I wish I could say it was so, but it isn't.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think even within that framework, there are different tax approaches that could be taken too. So depending on the earnout or other factors, how at the end of the day, what's really going to net you the most revenue. And I think that's a great thing to consider.
Yeah. So there's at least a dozen ways I could think of off the top of my head how you can structure a deal. And there's so many ins and outs, but I'm a big believer in that. We've all heard the expression win-win, but I think it needs to be win-win-win. It needs a triple win, right? We need to win. Whoever's acquiring our business needs to be a winning deal. And our existing team members and customers need to win. Like if everyone wins, there can't be a win-lose scenario or someone's going to not be happy.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think, a lot of cases, a lot of company owners, they are concerned about the long-term viability of the business, how it affects those employees and team members, like you're saying. And I think, and along those lines, I know I've heard you say before, it's important to have more than one exit strategy also. So maybe if you've got a few horses in the race, whether it be different suitors or maybe some different options on how this transaction could take place and what it looks like. What were your advice?
Well, I always like my people I'm working with, to actually, we sit down and there's an exercise that we go through and write down who would be potential. Could be a big multinational. It could be who just wants to do, they usually call them tuck-in acquisitions, where they want to expand, they want another dot on the map, or you're a pain in the, and they just want to buy you out so that, their local branch can grow. That can happen. You can have, family members is what most people think of. But some that can be really good or really bad. And are the kids ready and able to run the business? Have they paid the dues? The other thing is, you may want to stay on as a lower percentage owner and give some shares to 2 or 3 key members of your team and just let them run it, or hire a COO or a general manager and forfeit a little bit of the annual profits, and just so you can enjoy life. Go get your 43-foot diesel pusher and go have a time as your general manager is running the business. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, except that you've got potential liability exposure that maybe you wouldn't have if you had the money in the bank.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know you as a coach and a consultant, helping companies understand the health of their business and what's in their best interest of growing profitably. I know that you've mentioned in the past how important data is in being forward thinking and in planning. what role does data play in all of this that companies need to consider that maybe aren't?
Well, it's huge, especially when you get to the transition stage. Most companies will want to do due diligence, and you need to know your numbers before you start putting a price on it. We've all watched Shark Tank and shows like that, and people get just nailed for having crazy valuations on their business. And we've all seen it in dealing with contractors. But the thing is with data is that, well, most of in the insurance industry, as a vendor for contracting, we have what's called KPIs, key performance indicators.
Hmm.
And what when they started pushing these down on us, they really made us better business operators. Because before, a lot of us weren't looking at things. We weren't looking at the average response time. We weren't looking at the average time a file was open, how quick we could dry a job, or how quickly we could rebuild it. And so I always say we need to have our own KPIs, not just our customers, and we need to look at them on a dashboard type basis. One-page report, because most entrepreneurs will glaze over if you give them a 10-page, text only document. They're not going to read it. Most of us, what do we do when we get our financial reports? We're crying out loud. We look at two places: top number for revenue, go to the bottom page, bottom number, bottom right-hand number for the profit. And goodness gracious, we would never want to look at the balance sheet and figure out some things like days sales outstanding or days payable outstanding. Oh my goodness, that would just be too hard to do. But it's vital to the business to know some of those numbers. And it's easy to do with different types of software today.
Yeah, so you're really what you're talking about then is live field data, live visibility, daily updates on dashboards. So really you've got a finger on the pulse of the business.
Yeah, and as far as for the contractor running in their field management, that's becoming more live data all the time too, from from your employee timekeeping and job costing. Is our biggest cost on a job usually is our personnel, so we don't have that number down pat, we're in trouble right out of the gate. The other thing that's coming on, for example, nowadays is that there's newer technology, AI type of technology, where you take a piece of equipment out of your shop, put it in your truck, take it to a job site and leave it. A lot of our things we can charge for, or at least we know it's there. Nowadays, we don't have to barcode swipe. We don't have to write it down. It's automatically done because there's a little RFD or whatever transponders in each location. And, you can, and it uses GPS as well, but a manager can set and say, okay, I've got 77 air movers out in the field today and 27 dehumidifiers. They're all billable by the day, and I've got it all right there live. I can see where it is. I'm not going to lose it. I'm going to capture every hour I should be billed for it. So having live data in the field as well is extremely important.
Yeah, I would imagine for potential purchaser of a business too, if they know you're using those types of systems, they're going to have a lot more trust in the data that you're presenting.
Absolutely. That is 100% right. I've seen that happen several times over the years.
So this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I guess just kind of wrapping up, one of the things that I like to ask a lot of the guests is, what's one key practice or best practice or something that's been impactful in your entrepreneurial career that you could point to for the success you've had?
Always be learning. Always be learning. And it takes some time, but it's a very inexpensive way to do it. Be a reader. You want to be a leader, be a reader. You want to be an expert at something. You have an expertise you want to learn, whether it be writing code or how to do a water damage. If you read a book a month on a particular topic you want to be good at, in a year's time, you're going to be surprised at how much better you are at understanding whatever it is you want to get better at.
Great advice. Yeah, that's very wise, I would say. If you could kind of relive or do something different or change a decision you made at one point, is there anything real specific that pops out in your mind that maybe someone else can learn from?
Wow. Now that's an interesting question. Is this where we get real honest or we just kind of get fluffy?
I mean, something that's applicable to others too, probably, professionally speaking.
Listen more and talk less. Really listen. And by listening, not only verbally, but listen to the body language of your team members, of your customers. Show some empathy instead of always, no matter what type of contractor is listening to this podcast, when we go into someone's house or business to work, we've probably done that job function 1,000 times. To our customer, it could be the first time they've ever had this type of job done. And to them, they're kind of overwhelmed and they don't understand the processes. And, so we got to show some empathy, some patience, listen, read their situation, understand what they're going through so that we can serve them better.
Wow, that's a great note to end it on. And I so much appreciate the conversation today. It's been a pleasure to have you on, Dan, and look forward to continuing to keep in touch in the future and following your success.
Thanks, Mike, and look forward to many years of this great podcast series that you started in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you to the guests for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you like the conversation that Dan and I had today, or were able to learn anything new and interesting, please subscribe to our podcast and give us a rating and review on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us on Instagram at @workmax_ or on LinkedIn at WorkMax. And again, please leave us a 5-star rating and review if you enjoyed the show. We appreciate your support. And if you can subscribe and download those episodes, that really helps us out to continue to bring these types of discussions to you to help you improve your business and your life.